All right, Coach Poe. Hey, thanks for joining me on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. Really do appreciate it. I'm very excited. Have tried in the past, and for whatever reason, we've just never been able to connect. So really appreciative that you are finally, maybe you built up the courage to sit on the hot seat, on the Simple Coach hot seat. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
We kind of have a history, right? Like going back where you did some great things at my alma mater, but I'm going to let you speak to it. So maybe we could just start. Hey, can you just tell me about your soccer journey? How did you end up becoming the coach at Case Western?
Yeah, I guess out of college, I started out at Mount Union. I got offered kind of through a random circumstances, got offered an assistant job there, kind of like an assistant intern kind of position. And so I was there for my first 2 years out of college. During my second year there, the head coach that came in and sort of brought me in with him left for a women's assistant job at Penn State. So at the time, they kind of basically Larry Karras that was there.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm gonna see if I don't know anything about soccer, but I'm gonna see if I think you can do this job, and if I can, we'll consider you for the head job, and if not, then no. And they ended up for
That's the
some
way he
reason,
talks too.
yeah,
So anybody who knows him, yeah, he's pretty
right,
straightforward like that.
right. So they ended up giving me the head job there, and yeah, I started there, was there the head coach for 5 seasons, and then this opportunity at Case came up, like right at the start of COVID. The previous athletic director, we had a new one come in a couple years ago, but previous athletic director reached out to me and asked if I would consider applying for the position, and that's kind of how that all started, and kind of checked things out, and went through the interview process, and it seemed like a good school and a good opportunity. And my family's all in Cleveland too, which was good, and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
So you're Cleveland native, local, or the environs of Cleveland, right?
Yeah, I'm local. All my family's local,
Mm-hmm.
so it's nice from that standpoint.
Yeah. It makes total sense. Uh, what is it about Case? Like, guy, athletic director reaches out. I probably know the answer to this, right? But what is it about Case? Case is a special place. Like, I'll just say it. Having been there, I did Fields of Dreams, and not knowing anything about the school. It's my first time where I really walked through. It is a really special place. But maybe you could talk a little bit about why it was so intriguing to you, aside from the family part, which I totally get, but just from the
Yeah,
soccer standpoint and the school standpoint, what was it about Case?
yeah. Like I said, it's a great place, really exciting academically, really neat kids that come through here, and just the ability to work with a really intelligent, motivated, high academic kid, I think is really cool. Campus is great. I think it's a really neat cultural area with the museums and Little Italy and
Yeah.
everything going on. And I also think just athletically, I think the history of the program, there hasn't been a ton of success. And
Mm-hmm.
for me personally, I just felt like, man, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. It's a great school academically. It's a really neat place. The facilities are really cool. And I just thought, like, this is a really neat opportunity. Like, why can't we be good
Mm-hmm.
consistently? Why can't we go to the NCAA tournament and try and be on the national level all the time? And so I just thought it was a really cool opportunity for
Mm-hmm.
all those factors and more. And that was
Yeah.
very intriguing to me. So
Yeah. How long do you think it's taken you to you for those who don't know, you basically took over the role from Coach Brandon Bianco, who went to Denison. That opens up the spot at Case. You moved into Case. How, I'm always curious about somebody stepping in new into the role, and especially around the time you came on board, right? COVID and all that craziness.
yeah,
Like, how long did it take? Do you think it took you to sort of get assimilated, sort of feeling like, hey, I'm in control of the program. This is my thing to sort of build up. How long do you think that took you?
It probably took a couple years, to be honest
Mm-hmm.
with you. Like when I started out and it was COVID, like we couldn't. There were so many things that we couldn't do. We couldn't do meetings. We couldn't practice. There's no season. There's no in-person meetings. There's no nothing for a long period of time. And so you're trying to like build things while
Yeah,
doing this. Basically, you're Zoom
yeah.
meeting with people and Zoom working out and whatever. So I think that was challenging. My it wasn't until my second year that I think we even had some in-person classes again
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So I think between that as well as just kind of yeah, like when a new coach comes in, obviously they're gonna have different ideas and maybe different players that fit in with those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things or whatever. And I think just between learning things, shaking things out, like getting the kind of foundation built, it definitely took a couple years and it's kind of a continual working process. But
How do you? This is another one. This is total. I never asked this before. But when you got there, sort of and I don't mean this in a disparaging way or in a bad way for anybody, right? It's just the
sure.
reality. So you coming in as a coach, you, I got to believe you did some sort of assessment of your players that you had on the roster. Like, how close did they align with sort of the type of player that you would want, right? Like, I don't want to say ideal player, but right, like you have
Hmm.
this vision of the type of player that you want to come on board. Like, how close is that alignment between the old guys that have been around, and then you coming on board?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, like I didn't have any real um, I don't know if issue is the right word, but like I
Mm-hmm.
thought the players that were there were good. Like I
Yeah.
thought there was good quality. I think like a lot of attributes that I'd be looking for, different positions, different players. So I think it wasn't necessarily anything playing wise. I mean, obviously you have maybe small things that you want at a certain position or whatever it is,
Right.
but
Right.
overall, like I think the quality of the squad and some of the qualities in general that I
Mm-hmm.
would want were there. I think it was more just like mentality, like in personality, like
Yeah.
different type of person maybe,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
different type of mental qualities that I'd be looking for in some of the
Yeah.
guys. But I think that was the main shift probably.
Yeah. All right. So you opened up the can of worms. Mental qualities. Like, what are the sort of things that you look in a player that you think, man, this I'm assuming the academics and all that stuff fall into place. Like, this is the kind of player that would fit great.
Yeah, I think for us, like we're always really first and foremost looking for really high character kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just really good people, um, hard workers, respectful of others, and I think just like just a moral, high character person.
Mm-hmm.
I think is really the big thing, and then I think it's the mentality. It's the work ethic, it's the competitiveness, it's the drive. I think these kind of things, and just being really humble and really hardworking and a good attitude and positive, and
Mm-hmm.
I think this type of person is what I personally really look for and prefer, and I'd rather somebody like that than somebody that's is really talented without
Mm-hmm.
those aspects. So
Mm-hmm. Let me let that ring for a second. Sorry.
sure.
We're just obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. We'll get through it. We'll get through it. 11:51. Okay. All right. All right. It, when you came on, like, like how much of it your first year? How much of it was determined? Was your recruiting already predetermined? I can't recall when you sort of came on board. So was that already set in stone? It's probably like early in the year, right? But
Yeah,
pretty too far along to actually go out and recruit your own class.
correct. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. The guys that were coming in, I guess I got hired in June of 2020, so
Mm-hmm.
the class was already set,
Oh,
the
yes.
incoming freshmen, and then it was just about trying to work on the next cycle, basically.
Yeah. 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 That's always tricky too, right? Like, yeah. It, type of player are you able to attract at Case? Right. Again, it is unique. So, I mean, are you recruiting nationally? Are you able to get kids from all over?
Yeah, yeah, anywhere around the United States. I think international players are a little trickier for
Hmm.
various reasons to get in here, um, but yeah, anywhere around the United States, I think that's one of the exciting things as well. Is you can attract really high level players from all over the place and
Hmm.
be in conversations and competing with kids that are, they're Division 1 level,
Hmm.
type of players, and the caliber they are. So I think that's another cool aspect of it that's kind of fun and exciting. I think it's just extremely competitive, and it's a grind and trying to find kids that check all of the boxes, and
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and all those kind of
That's the
things.
hard. I don't want to. That's the hard part, right? Like great player, dumb as rocks, right? Doesn't doesn't add up for you, right? But finding
Sure,
the right combination of kids. Can I do, this is other something else that interests me, and I've been thinking a lot about, especially with all the changes and all the crazy rules and non-rules and all that stuff. Like, are you able to attract kids who like are seriously thinking like, hey, Division 1 might be the way to go? Again, because academically how unique you are, and it becomes right. It becomes an academic discussion more than I don't mean this in a bad way, like a soccer discussion, but
sure, sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think it kind of comes in two ways. Like you may get somebody at that level because they're willing to skip out on that level for the academics, like they're really
hmm
serious academically, and that's the
yeah,
driving force in their
yeah,
college decision. Or you may get somebody from that level just because they fall through the cracks,
yeah,
or like we've got a kid on the team who's currently a freshman who's really really talented, and for a long time like had interest from several Division 1 schools,
yeah,
and it just sort of like they were kind of he was just waiting to see what was going to materialize, and at the end things kind of fell through, and
uh
and kind
yeah,
of we sort of kept in touch, and it sort of just ended up working out. So I think
yeah,
those are
yeah,
kind of how it seems to play out mostly.
yeah. Do you do, have you seen any real changes in the recruiting side because of all the like the portal and kids now being able to basically switch schools like it were hang on. Ugh. Okay, let's let that ring. Um yeah, so I'll just ask like are you seeing any differences between the way you used to recruit previous to all the NCAA rule changes and the roster size and all that stuff to today? I'm really curious. I hear a lot of people getting impacted by that in different ways, but
Right.
everyone feels something, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's really like, like in our conference, for example, the last, I mean, it seems like every year everyone is coming back the next year with some really good on paper looking grad transfer or some sort of, somebody out of the portal. In the last 2 years, I think both years Emory has had the top scorer in the conference, and
Yeah.
who has come from, I think like this year they had a kid come in that was a captain at Princeton,
Hmm.
and so I think it's definitely like impacted recruiting. I think there's a lot of good players like flying around, even in Division 3 and stuff like
Hmm.
this, and I think just some of the rule changes too, and whatever, like the roster cap thing that's coming into Division 1,
Yeah.
that's impacted a lot of kids' recruiting cycles for this class in
Yeah.
particular. So, like we have a kid, for example, that we're kind of like still working on that. At one point he had interest and offers from some Division 1s in the Carolinas, and then
Wow.
some of
Yeah.
those places like kind of decided once that came out to put their stuff on hold, and they might,
Yeah.
with the roster cap, like they might just there's going to be a lot of kids going to the portal as
Yep.
the rosters get trimmed down, and like so they're just going to maybe focus more on portal kids than high school
Yeah.
kids. So it's yeah, it's definitely it's all over the place, different
Yeah. Yeah.
things.
Do you use the portal at all? I mean, are you recruiting through the portal?
Yeah, yeah. We look at it a ton for sure, but I don't think it's like something that we can or want to build our recruiting strategy on per
Yeah.
se. But you're always just kind of keeping an eye on it, see
Yeah.
available if there's something that might be a fit. But
Another Princeton captain. That wouldn't be a
right,
bad.
yeah, yeah. If you can get somebody that can score 10 goals for you,
Yeah,
why not?
yeah, yeah. You'll take that, right?
Yeah.
Um. All right. From your perspective, how would you how would you say your season went?
This past year, yeah, I don't know. I think it. I mean, I wasn't thrilled with it, obviously, um, but so I think it was disappointing in a lot of ways. But I also think though too, it's a good learning curve to some extent. I think we were felt pretty positive about the seasons we had in 22 and then again in
Hmm.
23, and I think from those teams like we lost a lot of leadership and a lot of
Hmm.
starters. Um, and then I think the guys that, so I think that was probably a big dynamic with this team. Like we knew that we had lost leaders and we needed to fill those shoes. And we knew we lost a lot of experience and guys that played a lot of games and stuff like that. And there's good players that came in and filled those shoes. But when you haven't really played before and like
Yeah.
been in those moments, I think that's what really hurt us. And I think, you know, those two factors combined. So I think partway through the year, halfway through the season, we're okay. Like I think at one point we were like 5-2-1,
Yeah.
so like in a good position, whatever. And then we just like struggled the
Hmm.
back half of the year, and it was just like we played Mount Union for example, and like
Yeah.
we're winning, and then we give up like a sloppy corner kick goal, so it's 1-1. We take the lead
Yeah.
again, and it's like second half, and we gotta make a silly mistake trying to dribble the
Yeah.
ball around in our own box, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of a fluky penalty and you tie. Or we have
Yeah.
games where we're winning by a couple goals and we lose.
Yeah.
And I think just the inexperience in some moments,
Yeah.
hurt us. But so
It's
it
a
was
good
okay. But I think
Yeah.
I think it was good though in a lot of ways for a lot of those guys to learn some of that and pick up experience. So
I watched. I think I watched your the Emory game, and then I watched. Who was it? Was the Mount Union game? And you hit on something that I always it's intuitive, right? I can't point to the X's and O's, just the nature of what I'm watching, but I will say, like, it did seem like there was this, you were missing something, somebody to step up, somebody to be the guy and be like, we're not letting this happen again. And I was
yeah,
intuitively, that's why I kept saying, I'm like, I keep waiting for that. Who's that guy who's going to make something happen? And it just never
sure.
seemed to materialize. Am I off on that, or?
No, definitely. And I think that's like a continual conversation within the group. And like, going back to the leadership side of things, I think we talked a lot about that all through the spring and all through the fall of like, hey, like, I think a lot of times when especially when things aren't going well, like who we need people to be willing to kind of like galvanize the group and like pull the team along with you, and even little things like stepping up and just communicating, or
Yeah.
like, hey, let's go guys, heads up, let's keep working. Those things I think make a massive, massive difference. Um, and I think, yeah, that was definitely a somewhere where we struggled, really trying to get guys to
Hmm.
step into that. And again, there's a lot of, I think, different reasons for that, but I would agree. I think that's really spot on. Like, and I think when like good teams that I've had, coached in college soccer, you've always had some of those
Yeah.
players that could kind of will the rest of the group
Yeah.
forward, and
Yeah.
I think that's a massive, massive thing to have in your team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because at the beginning of the season, and I forget who you played. I'm trying to look at your schedule. I've watched so many games; they sort of all bleed into each other. Maybe it was the
Yeah, I
Stockton
bet.
game because it was Stockton, and they're an hour from my house, or yeah, an hour and 15 from my house. Um, the soccer was good, like, you know what I mean. Like and you're like, you realize that sometimes is just not enough, right? And you just,
Sure.
that's the tricky part, I think, is finding that balance,
Yeah.
between the soccer and then finding those guys, like you say, that just will it. like that
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna will this to happen.
Yeah.
Um, um, it, what would you say your best, like if you could capture in this season, like what was the game where you're like, man, if we could just do this every game, we are going to be unstoppable?
Yeah. It's a good question. Um, and I think I think there's a lot of like moments within,
Yeah.
like, we played Rochester, and the first half was like probably our best half of the year.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the second half, like last 15 minutes, we give up 3 goals and lose. We're up 2-0.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably a lot of the problem. Like we couldn't sustain it, or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. But I think, so there's moments, I think, in a lot of games that were very positive. I think the John Carroll game for us was really good this year. Like, they were in the top 25 coming in that game. They're
Yeah.
really like senior,
Yeah.
fifth year heavy team. And again, we're at that point in time, like we went into that game after playing Denison, and we literally had no. I don't think we had any wingers available in the roster because of injuries and stuff. The game before, we switched our shape. We had all these like sophomores and
Yeah.
guys playing in the back line, all this kind of stuff. But I thought it was what we were looking for in terms of these
Hmm.
things, like the mentality, the grit, and we didn't always didn't have much of the ball, and we kind of knew that would be the case coming into it, but just like the mentality, the work ethic, the team spirit, that it was where it needed to be. And I think that was the thing. Okay, if we can learn how to replicate, and some of you young guys, if you can learn how to be at this level of intensity and
Yeah.
focus and this all the time, that's when you put yourself in position to be successful. So that was, I
Yeah.
think, one moment that I would point to.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just say it sounds like just them basically what we've talked about so far. It sounds like you put a lot of weight on the cultural aspects of your team, right? Like you said, you're talking leadership, but that to me ends up also being sort of what you drive culturally within the
Yeah.
locker room. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's the number one thing, the most important thing, the biggest thing we do work on. Yeah, I think it's, to me, like the culture is the number one thing that's correlated to success.
Hmm.
So I think it's really massively important to us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. I just go back to what you said earlier, where you spend a lot of time in the recruiting process finding, you know, quality men, like moral qualities and all of those things, because it takes years to build up a strong culture in a locker room, and it takes one guy to destroy it, right? I think
Yes.
that's a very scary prospect if you're a coach, right? You recruit the wrong guy and you just ruined everything you've done for the last 5 years or
Yeah,
whatever now.
for sure.
So what so knowing what you know now, what are your thoughts about 2025, sort of going in, relatively young team, looking for the leadership? Is that still something you're working on? Do you see things like changing on your squad to be like, 2025 is going to be our year?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always hesitant to say any year is going to be our year because you just never know,
You never know.
you know.
Yeah, you could be
But
decimated by injuries in preseason and you're done.
right, right, exactly. So you never know, but yeah, I think we'll see. I think it's nice that we have a lot of guys in the team that are coming back, and especially like last year, we played with a brand new back four,
Yeah.
and we had to switch because of injuries. We had to switch our back four. I don't know how many times. So the fact that we can actually put the same guys out there again, I
Yeah.
think is a huge help.
Yeah.
Um, and I think just from some of the things that we're talking about, I think culturally, leadership, like I think the guys that are going to be back are they're good characters, they're good mentalities. They want to compete, they want to get better. I think there's guys in the team that if they've been around being in the NCAA tournament and then they felt this thing of like just total flop,
Yeah.
last year, and I think they're really motivated and
Yeah.
to improve and these kind of things. So yeah, I think it's trending in the right direction, but we got a long way to go. We got to get a lot
Mhm.
better. We just weren't good enough
Yeah.
last year in a lot of different ways. But I do think it does help. Like getting a year older. And, for us, one of our best and biggest classes are the sophomores. And
Uh-huh.
I think sometimes some of these
Ooh,
things with like leadership and all that, it's not necessarily that you like there's a lot of good leaders in that class, but it can be difficult when you're
sophomore.
you're
Yeah.
19
Yeah.
and the team's not quite your team yet.
Yeah.
And so I think with some of that moving in that direction, I think that really helps.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think there's some positives, but there's a lot of work to do, and we'll see.
Yeah. Are you done with your recruiting? Or are you
Uh,
still, I mean,
yeah,
for 2025, not for,
it's still going. I mean, we've got probably half the class done. We've got some other offers out that we should
Mhm.
hear back in the next week or two if they're going to
Mhm.
accept or whatever. So we're trying to wrap it up, but like it just seems like it's things have gone so long over the last couple of years with some of these changes and all that, and
Yeah.
like the kid I mentioned earlier that was some of the Division One interests, like you might have somebody like that that's kind of like you're just keeping in touch with because they're so good you're willing to wait. And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
didn't end up till like last April that he officially decided to come here. So it's just like yeah, it's still going, and
Yeah.
you're always
Yeah.
looking and whatever. So
I had somebody tell me that with all the changes, they basically don't stop recruiting until the first day of camp because they're like, it's just so wild. It's almost like Wild Westish, is the way he described it to me. Like, it's
yeah,
just a little, you know, uh, the players have a little bit more control power than they have had in the past.
for sure.
Just because they got an offer doesn't mean that they have to accept immediately. Like all these different things and the way well, sort of all the NCAA rules are going, it just sort of buys these kids a lot of time that previously might not have had.
Right, right.
Yeah. What do, can you just talk a little bit? Like, what's your thought on your scheduling, on who you look to schedule, uh, and especially now with NPI, where I don't want to say strength of schedule doesn't seem to be as big of a deal, but right. I mean, it used to be, yeah, I'm you know, 565 strength and schedule or whatever it is. And now it's a totally different. Are you looking at your scheduling a little bit differently? This is totally random questions just popped into my head. So I
Yeah,
apologize.
I mean, I think everybody was kind of like, I think in the last cycle, I mean, when that came out, nobody really could give any definitive answers on what it was going to do or how we should
Hmm.
react. So I think there's a lot of people like panicking and switching games and canceling stuff and
Yeah.
whatever. I think like having done one cycle with it, I don't know. I don't know if anybody can say for sure, but I think at the end of the day, to me, it's just like I don't know. I think it's close enough to previous where I'm not really like making that many drastic changes. I think at the
Hmm.
end of the day, like we need to try and play hard, good teams to get ready for the
Hmm.
UAA. The UAA is going to be super hard,
Hmm.
and generally speaking, if you can have a good non-conference record and do fairly well in the UAA, you're going to be in good position for the
Yeah.
postseason. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of how we're looking at it as of now. I think there was some uncertainty, but I think it's I don't know. I think it hasn't looked too drastic in this first edition of it to
Iteration.
really
Yeah.
like panic or go too crazy.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're still trying to do a lot of like John Carroll and Kenyon and in these
Yeah.
kind of teams. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you guys you have in Ohio some great competition outside, right? Like you could just drive down the road figuratively and play some top teams. You're not like stuck in no man's land and you're kind of having to travel halfway across the country for it.
right,
Um, tell me a little bit about the UAA. Again, kind of a unique conference in terms of the like schools that are part of it and the quality on the men's side. You could talk a little bit about that.
yeah, yeah, it's really cool. I think it's super kind of unique in Division Three. The whole conference. There's 8 of us. They're all urban research universities, super
Hmm.
high academic, major cities and stuff like that. So um, yeah, I think just the type of universities that they all are, you attract a lot of really good talent, and so the level is very high. The travel is really cool. You know, you're seeing New York City and Boston and Atlanta and these kind of places. So I think it really is. It's really neat. It's really attractive from a recruiting standpoint. I think it's just a cool, different
Mm-hmm.
experience. I think that's maybe not something that you really see in Division Three.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And you don't play inner week. You don't play Monday through Thursday, right? You
correct. Yeah, it's
yeah,
mostly weekend stuff.
yeah,
The
yeah.
conference. Yeah.
What's the toughest place to play? That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
That's dartboard material. He doesn't think we're
Yeah.
a hard place to
Yeah.
play.
Honestly, all of them. Like, there's not
Yeah.
a like, every single one. It's just like, oh my gosh, we got to, and all the coaches are really good and
Yeah,
really
yeah,
sharp, and
yeah.
so it's just anywhere you go, it's extremely challenging. But I mean, yeah, if
That's fair.
yeah, yeah, I guess I would just say that. I mean, obviously Emory's a little different too, because they have the grass. They're the only one that has grass,
Grass. Yeah.
and that's a little bit of an adjustment when you play on the turf. But every single one is
Yeah.
really really tough.
Yeah. How can I'm just curious, and maybe it doesn't. Like, is does the travel impact you guys at all? Like having to, because right? I mean, I'm assuming some of these are all. I mean, a lot of these are all plane, right? Like you hop on a
Yeah,
plane and.
yeah. No, it definitely is really tough. I mean, like we usually have one double weekend
Hmm.
in the season where you do like a Friday, so you play two games in one weekend, like a Friday Sunday. That's really tough.
Yeah.
Our double has always been WashU and U Chicago over the last
Uh
couple of years, so it's
huh.
like
Oh my
you're
gosh.
playing, yeah, right. So
Yeah.
like
Good luck.
this, yeah, yeah. So I think I'm trying to think like this year we drove to Chicago this year, so we drove all day
Hmm.
Friday to get to Chicago, trained a little bit, played Chicago the following night, wake up in the morning, then we drove to St. Louis, and then play St. Louis, and then
Wow.
play them Sunday at like 1 o'clock. And it's just it's tough. Or like maybe maybe you're playing someone on a Saturday, and we always leave the day before, which is great. But
Hmm.
sometimes just for whether it's budgetary or whatever, like the best option that is picked for you to get to the next
Yeah.
location is a 5 a.m. flight,
Yeah.
and the guys are awake. It's like 2:30 in
Yeah.
the
More.
so
Yeah.
I think there can be some real challenges with like the travel logistics and like
Hmm.
rest and like you're preparing for the games. But I think at the end of the day for us, we just try and take it all in stride and take it
Hmm.
as a challenge, and it just is what it is, and like buck up
Yeah.
and let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
So,
It's never going to be easy, right? Unless you manage to somehow miraculously schedule um, every game at home. Like
right,
there's no getting around it, except for, like I said, not so much in conference, but out of conference. You're lucky where you have plenty of places where you're within a reasonable drive
right, right,
for
for sure.
really good games. Um, uh, this might be. I hope it's not bulletin board stuff, but hey, when you look out at the who's out there, who like is there if you had your druthers, is there anyone that you would want to play? Like you'd just personally be like, how awesome would it be if we could play? Because it came up yesterday in an interview I did with, or 2 days ago, Occidental in California. How great would it be to play them? Is there anybody like that on your radar?
Yeah. I don't think there's nobody that like I'm like, oh, like I,
Yeah,
really, you know, but I just think there's places that just like geographically or whatever that you just don't get to do.
yeah,
So whether it's, I mean, I haven't been able to play any like the NESCACs since I've been.
yeah,
That's all. I'm sure that'd be a great experience to do
yeah,
some of that, of course, at the level they're at. Obviously, stuff on the West Coast would be really cool with
yeah,
Occidental. That'd be a great experience for the team,
yeah,
or even going down, down south,
yeah.
and some of those programs too. So I would say nobody in particular. I think there's a lot of good soccer all over the place and unique and
Hmm.
different challenges. But I think there's a lot of great programs that we just haven't been able to cross paths with just yet.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. I asked these questions that put you in a tough spot. I apologize.
it's okay.
Somebody's watching. It's like, well, damn him. I thought he was.
That's it.
um, it- you you have a pretty wide like a pretty wide experience. I mean, you did, what was it, Cleveland United? I can't remember the Cleveland, I can't remember which Cleveland team you've coached. So you've coached kids at all these different levels. Could you just, like, what's your impression of the level of soccer in Division 3 generally? You don't have to get about specific programs, but versus, I'll just say, other divisions, and the difference between the athletes that you might come across that, you know, could be Division 1, or or a high end Division 3 player.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really good, and I think it's getting better all the time. The level and the quality I think is getting higher and higher, and I think yeah, there's definitely kids that I've worked with in Division 3, and I've coached like I coached NPSL a little bit, where you're
Yep.
getting kids all over the place from a lot of Division 1 players, but we had some Division 3 players that were really
Mm-hmm.
really good. Um, or you've got guys that are out of college and that are
Mm-hmm.
you know, almost 30 years old or whatever it is, or former pro players and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think, you know, there's definitely kids that I've worked with, whether in that setting or in the Division 3 setting, where it's like, man, this kid could or should be playing Division 1
Mm-hmm.
soccer somewhere, or you see him in a an NPSL or a semi-pro environment, and you wouldn't be able to tell that they who was who,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
schools they're from. So, but yeah, I think so the level I think is really good. I think but yeah, there's obviously differences too amongst the divisions. I think generally speaking, some of these guys, you've definitely a lot of kids in Division 3 that they're very good soccer players, or they're just as good technically, but maybe they're just a little undersized, or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like this that maybe keeps them from getting you know
Yeah.
kind of snatched up at a higher
Step
level.
slower, or
Yeah,
yeah, just
just
not
some
big.
some small aspect in their game
Yeah,
that
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
just
They're
you know
five
that
foot nine instead of 6'2" as a
sure.
defender, or something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. I'm always curious about that. I don't know if there's a way. I have a thesis that, right. I think the top end of Division 3 could. I it definitely the top 20. I think could give a run for their money at some high level.
Hmm.
Equally, right, at, you know not taking into account advantages that Division 1 has, that by the time preseason rolls around for Division 3, they've already been going for a month, that sort of thing.
Right.
If you could
Right.
level it out somehow, I think just soccer wise, it's a lot more competitive than what I think people would give it credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. All right. What what does your spring look like? What do you have planned? You have an extra week, which I'm assuming you're pretty pleased about. No extra games, which I don't understand, but whatever. It- like what are some of the things that you're going to be looking at to do this, or I don't want to say execute on this spring, um, which in preparation for 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's like it's a lot of the cultural stuff. Like, I think it's a lot of back to basics. I think there's a lot of basic things that we got away from or didn't execute well when it goes back, to the 2024 season, and that's both like on the field and off the field. To be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a lot of what we're trying to focus on, whether it's in training or out of training. It's just like standards, mentality, culture,
Mm-hmm.
these kind of things. So I think that will be reflective in like the training exercises that we do, as well as like a lot of things that we're doing and working on, and team meetings, and these
Mm-hmm.
kind of things, and just kind of building some of the trying to make sure that is. Because I think in 2022 and 2023, like I don't think the talent wise are probably not too different,
Mm-hmm.
but those pieces were really strong, and I think we fell off a little bit in that respect this year,
Yeah.
and I think that's the big thing that we need to and want to
Yeah.
address, moving into the next cycle.
Yeah.
So
Can, can I ask you this? Just popped into my head. You know how hard is it during the off season to sort of keep the guys sort of still within the bounds of what you expect out of the locker room when you know you can't interact with them in the ways that you would during the season, right? Like in all the different contacts that you have with them. How difficult does that end up being? And does that consume a lot of your time when you do have the opportunity to interact with guys? Like, how do you rein? I don't want to say rein them back in, right? Because I think
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's for sure challenging, and yeah, the contact is different. What you can do is a little bit different, and all that kind of stuff. But I think how challenging it is. I think a lot of it, to be honest with you, is recruiting,
mm-hmm.
and it's the same thing with we're talking a lot about character and these kind of
Yeah,
things and like mentality. Like if you can recruit that in, I think that eliminates a lot of issues right there. If you bring in good
yeah,
people, that eliminates a lot of
yeah,
issues at the forefront.
yeah,
And I think that's really important. And I know, like a coach, a friend of mine once told me, like in his program, the most important decision he makes is who are the guys that get to walk through the locker room door. It's like more
yeah,
important than anything, tactics, whatever.
yeah.
And I think that's very, very true. So I guess bringing that back to your question, like yeah, I think it is really difficult and it's challenging, but if you can get good guys in that they want to work, they want to train, they don't want to take time off, they believe in what the program's doing, they believe in your values, like I think it becomes a lot easier for the group to keep going and keep
Mm-hmm.
progressing and all that, even though things are a little bit more limited.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good. That's very true. Very true. Which is why I kept expecting your phone call because you wanted to recruit me. But I totally understand why you wouldn't, based on that. Not to mention I'd never get into case. But um, yeah, I'm. It's funny. It's because I just gotten older, right? Like I find the more interesting stuff around what you do, what coaches do, is a lot less around what you do on the field. Like
Sure.
this. I tell people this all the time, and it's not the right way to describe it, but the soccer part, like I'll watch anything. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. There's no emotional thing to me to watch a game. It's just okay. This guy's doing that, and this guy's doing that, and oh, watch that guy. He's pretty good. But the more interesting thing I think is like you have 30 guys under your or however many on your roster under
Yeah.
your watch, and how do you get them all to sort of align into this common cause that you want to in a season? I find that to be so much more interesting, just
Yeah.
and harder, right? Like let's be real, like you said, like yeah, maybe that is the toughest choice of who you let come walk through the doors in the locker room. Maybe that
Mhm.
is so much harder than who your starting 11 is going to be, right?
Yeah,
So
for
I'm always
sure.
curious about that.
For sure.
Um, all right, Coach, this was fantastic. Do appreciate it. You are welcome on anytime on the channel. Um, I love having you on, and your insights into again sort of what you do is it always caught me, especially your time at Mount Union. The times we had to interact, I was always impressed with again sort of how you look at things and how you approach the game. So really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and hope to be back soon. And sooner. Hope we don't have to chase it down for a couple years or whatever.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Well,
it.
I'll ping you in the summer, like just before the season, and then I could run clips of you. You said this. What are you?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I'll hold your feet to the fire. No, yeah. You know what? What's funny? What's interesting? I was in Cleveland whenever it was, and I walked around campus. I did a Fields of Dreams, and I saw you with a recruit. You just were. I don't know where you were. I don't know anything about the campus, but it was near the stadium where you play, and I almost thought about going over to you but I was like, I can't. Being a YouTube influencer like me, I'm kind of antisocial, so I'm like, I can't. It feels weird, so I just kept going. I'm like, I'll get him. I'll get him at some
Ah,
point.
you should have. You should have
Yeah,
anytime.
yeah. Next time I'm in town, I that could be soon. So,
Yeah, let me know.
um, yeah. So, all right, Coach. Thank you again, and yeah, we'll look forward to connecting in the summer.
All right, stay warm.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. All right, thanks.
All right, yep. See ya.